Well, hello out there. How is everybody doing today? Welcome to today's continuing education series, Take Your Education Beyond the Basics. My name is Charla Snow. I am an essential oil educator and have been doing that for about the last almost 9 years. And I love it. It's my passion. I love educating and empowering others to be able to take control of their health naturally. Today, we are going to be jumping right in. We have a ton of ground to cover. And so we're going to just jump right into class number 8. And class number 8 is our final class in this series, and it is on the essential science and an introduction to essential oil chemistry. And so we're going to just dive right in. You might want to grab a pen and paper. We're going to be sharing a lot of information today, and a little bit's a little heavy. I'm going to try to break it down in a way that I hope will be really super digestible and easy to understand. And but you might want to grab a pen and paper. You also might want to just quickly eliminate any distractions, close the windows on other windows that you have open on your computer, close the door, tell the kids to, leave you alone, and let's just get into some really great information. So science, chemistry. You know what? Everything is chemistry. Every cell, every organ, every tissue in the body performs its function using chemistry, and essential oils are no different. It really is the chemistry of the oils that gives them the ability to do what it is that they do, to be able to be effective, to be therapeutic, and to be able to affect all of the systems of the body. And so over the next, I'm guessing probably about an hour, we're going to just really scratch the surface. But I am confident that through our discussion today, you are going to leave with a really strong basic foundation of the essential oil chemistry. And you're going to have a better understanding of how to select and use essential oils based on their chemistry. So you're going to feel so much more confident in making those choices. We're going to talk about 3 key things today. These are the 3 things we're going to talk about. Number 1, we're going to talk about why essential oils are so powerful. Why is it? What is it about their chemistry that gives them their superpowers, that makes them so effective? Number 2, we're going to talk about the different molecular groups. So what we do is we start to look at the different compounds that are in the essential oils, and we can start to classify them into different groups and see how they might perform and what they might do based on the groups that they're in. Number 3, we're going to talk about adulteration. We're going to talk about how different companies out there adulterate their oils and what you want to look for when looking for a truly pure therapeutic essential oil. So let's get started. And let's do a quick little foundation, lay the foundation for those of you who may be new or this may be your first class. Let's just recap what are essential oils. So essential oils are the volatile aromatic compounds. And I want to say those 3 words again because that's what this whole class today is based on. Essential oils are volatile aromatic compounds. All right, so compounds are these little constituents that are part of the plant, like the ingredients of the plant. So essential oils are the volatile aromatic compounds that come from the different parts of the plant, like the stems, the branches, the flowers, the seeds, the roots, the bark, all different parts of the plant. Now, every plant can have many, many different compounds. They can have dozens of compounds. They could have hundreds of compounds within that plant. And each of those compounds has a different therapeutic effect. So you can have one plant have many different uses, many different properties and effects that it can have on the body. So here you see these tiny little oil, these little white things that look kind of like an egg. And this is where the essential oils live. If you were looking through a microscope, this might be kind of what you would see. And that's where these special compounds, these special molecules live. And how we get the essential oils out of the plant is through a process called steam distillation. Most essential oils are created through steam distillation. Citrus oils are not, because it would the steam and heat would destroy the the constituents that are in that plant. So it's actually cold pressed. But for most of our essential oils, they are steam distilled. And here's how it works. So basically, the plant material is loaded into this big device. So you see here on your screen on the left-hand side, this is an example. This is actually ylang-ylang being distilled in Madagascar. So this is this big vat, and the plant material is then loaded into that big device. And from there, there's steam that is carefully at the perfect pressure and temperature. The steam is circulated within that device, and then the essential oil molecules start to become separated from the plant material. And as they are liberated from the plant material, they lift to the surface, and then they are able to be separated and extracted. Now, here's the first important thing to understand when it comes to chemistry and better understanding the molecules and compounds that we're actually extracting. So the first thing to understand is that only the smallest and most lightweight molecules from that plant come through the distillation process. All right. So specifically, they're molecules that are, if you remember from chemistry, the atomic mass units, the AMUs. So the only molecules that are actually coming through this with the steam and being extracted from that plant in this process are the smallest and the lightweight molecules that are about 500 atomic mass units or less. The heavier molecules that are higher than that are not extracted from the plant. They stay and they're left behind in the plant mass, in the plant material. And so, people will often say, what about herbs and oils? Well, herbs have a place, and they're a fantastic healing option as well. But oils and herbs can be different. In fact, herbs have actually lost about 95% of their small molecules. So this is part of what gives essential oils what I like to call their superpowers. Now, there's three attributes or characteristics that essential oils have that make them so effective. And I want to go through these three characteristics with you so that you have a deeper understanding of how they work and scientifically why they work so well. So the first attribute is that they are volatile. Remember that word we just said a few minutes ago, volatile aromatic compounds. What does volatile even mean? So this means that a liquid can vaporize into the air, and that's what makes essential oils have their aroma. That's what makes them fragrant. So let me give you a quick example. I travel quite a bit, and I am also someone who gets motion sickness pretty darn easily, especially if there's turbulence on the plane. And so I will oftentimes open up a bottle of ginger or peppermint to calm my stomach while I'm flying. And something interesting always happens. When I crack that lid, I can almost always see somebody from several rows away turn to their neighbor and say, what is that? Do you smell that? What does that smell? It smells really good. And they may be seated 3 or 4 rows away, but yet they can still smell it. Do you know why that is? So here's the reason. They are volatile. Those compounds are literally bouncing out of that bottle and actually entering into the atmosphere because they're able to vaporize into the air at room temperature, and you can smell them from a distance. That's what makes them volatile. So the key thing here is that it has to be at room temperature. At room temperature, generally, we can't smell liquids or solids from a distance. We can only smell gases from a distance. But we can smell essential oil compounds because, again, they're literally jumping out of the bottle and entering into the atmosphere. And from there, they can enter into our nose. We can smell them, but we are also then able to take them into our body through the olfactory system, and we're able to affect the limbic system and the brain and enter into the bloodstream. So it's so cool that they actually have this chemical characteristic that they're able to be so easily taken into our body. By contrast, just to give you an idea, fatty oils can't do that. Most fatty oils have about 1,000 atomic mass units or more, like coconut oil or a vegetable oil. It has a smell, yes, Vegetable oils will have a smell if you stick your nose right into the bottle, but the compounds are not aromatic. You can't smell them from across the room. And so that's one of the first properties that makes essential oils powerful and unique is that we are able to take them into our bodies through our olfactory system and have them affect our body through our olfactory system, which is something unique about them. So the next characteristic with essential oils, the next is that they are lipid or oil soluble. Now, this is super important, and this will make even more sense as we proceed through the different topics that we're going to talk about today. And the interesting thing here about essential oils is that even though they're oil soluble, they're not really oily, are they? They're actually, and here's a misconception, they're actually not even an oil at all. A pure essential oil should be clean and not oily, and it should be crisp, and it should be able to be absorbed really cleanly right into your skin. But what makes them oil soluble is that they don't dissolve into water. They dissolve into an oil. Now you'll see, and we'll talk about this more later, some oils will try to dissolve into water. They'll get close. They'll almost bind with water, but they won't totally bind with water. Whereas other oils are just, you put them in your glass of water and they just sit right on top. And so what is that difference? We're going to talk about that in the chemistry part in just a little bit. So this oil soluble piece is going to be really important, and as we understand how the essential oils work in the cell and how they're able to cross the blood-brain barrier, how they're able to penetrate our skin, how they're able to penetrate our cells. This is a key characteristic that makes them so powerful. And we're going to touch on that just as soon as I explain this last piece, which is the third attribute, which is that they have a compact molecular structure. So instead of being these long chains of molecules that would be more difficult to, say, absorb through your skin or absorbed through a cell, they are more shaped like rings. And so they have this compact structure that allows them to penetrate our skin and our cells and pass the blood-brain barrier. So it's because of these two pieces, being that they're oil soluble and being that they have this compact structure, that allows them to be able to affect every cell in our body. When we put the essential oils on the bottoms of our feet, we're able to affect every cell in our body. And so let's kind of put this into an application. So this, let's say, is a cell, and let's say it's a healthy cell, and you have about 1 trillion of them in your body. You have all kinds of cells. You have brain cells and bone cells and eyes and lungs and kidney cells, whatever, right? Around this cell, it would be bathed in a cellular fluid if it was in your body. So you would have this cell that would be bathing in this cellular fluid. Now, here's the thing. Inside of our bodies, everybody has a certain amount of what we're just going to label as the bad guys, okay? The bad boys. And they can be things like funguses, bacteria, or fungi, bacteria, and viruses, let's say, cancer, whatever, okay? So there's these bad things that are there, and our body is it's a constant our immune system is constantly working on fighting those things. Now, some of these bad boys can actually penetrate our cells, and they can get inside of our cell, like you see here in this picture with the virus being inside the cell. And once they're inside, these bad boys get to tell the cell what to do. They take charge, and they tell the cell to duplicate, and to duplicate more bad boys, okay? And so this bad boy is then, one of the first things it's going to do is it's going to instruct the cell to put this fatty lipid coating all around the cell. Now, why would it want to do that? Why would it want to have this barrier or this fatty coating around it? Well, it's to create protection. It's to create this protective barrier around the cell so that certain things can't get in, where it can stay in charge. And so where he's now inside this cell, he's protected this bad boy from any water-soluble threats like antibiotics. And this explains why when you have a virus, the virus generally sits inside your cell and you use an antibiotic and it's not going to do anything for you, right? You've been to the doctor, you have a virus, there's nothing I can do for you, go home, right? That's what you've all been told. So an antibiotic can't pass through that barrier. That's why. Now, what about an oil? Do you think an essential oil maybe, could penetrate an oil? Can an oil Is an oil soluble into an oil? It is. So an oil can penetrate an oil. So think about it. Think about this. You've had this experience. You've used the essential oils. I have. I know how quickly they work. I know that when I put oils on my kids' tummy for a stomach ache, that they feel better in a matter of minutes. I know that when I put them on the bottoms of my feet, that they're penetrating our bloodstream within 28 seconds. And so we know that they go into our body. And we know that the essential oils enter then into our bloodstream. So do you think essential oils can then, of course, get to the cell and that they can penetrate the cell? Yes, they can, right? Because again, that membrane around the cell is a lipid, and because the essential oil is lipid soluble, they have this perfect chemistry to come inside in the cell and to take care of that bad boy. So do you see now kind of starting to get an idea of how amazing the essential oil chemistry is and how exciting it is to learn about it? It's because of their unique chemistry that they're even able to do what they do, that they're able to penetrate the skin and to support the body actually on a cellular level. So really, it's these three pieces. It's their fact that they're aromatic, that they're volatile, the fact that they have this compact structure, and the fact that they are lipid soluble that allows them to be such a powerful solution. There's really big power in this little small chemistry that they have. Okay, so now let's jump into understanding the compounds that are part of these plants. So as we've already established, essential oils are natural aromatic chemical compounds that exist within the plant. We looked at the picture earlier, we looked at those little oil sacs, and we understand that essential oils are comprised of a bunch of different compounds, dozens, if not hundreds, that all do something that have a different healing action to them. So the first key thing to really understand here is that essential oils are they're this liquid, but this liquid is a complex mixture. Okay, it's not one compound, it's a complex mixture of many different chemical compounds. And each of those compounds has an action and a therapeutic property to it. So when you start to understand the chemistry, then you can start to understand the action that chemistry is going to create, whether that's through binding with a receptor site or whatever. Each chemical compound creates a specific action. So understanding it is going to allow you to be able to fine-tune your selection of essential oils. It's going to help you to make better treatment decisions, better treatment selections of essential oils based on that knowledge of the chemistry. However, along with that is an understanding that it's just a guide, right? This is just chemistry can really just be a guide, and there's some things that cannot be understood by chemistry alone. There's things that we don't understand about why essential oils work in a certain way, and there's some things that chemistry doesn't really explain a little bit. For the most part, it explains a whole lot, but there's some things with synergy and how certain oils work together to create a synergistic effect, and there's some things that maybe we just don't quite understand from chemistry alone. However, when you understand the chemistry a little bit, you're going to be able to make really far better, more accurate therapeutic, at least guesstimates when using an oil of what it's going to do for you. So the next thing to understand is that all of these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different compounds that we've just talked about will be able to be classified into groups or families. And so this is where we're really going to hone in today, is on these groups and families, because this actually makes it a whole lot easier than trying to memorize what hundreds and hundreds of different compounds do, but being able to understand what the group does. And so all of these different compounds can be classified into groups or families. And the way that they're classified is based on their atomic structure, which you don't need to know, but that's how they're classified. And as you look at each of these groups, there's some similarities. So the compounds that are within these groups have really similar properties. They have similarities in what action they're going to do. And so this is how we're going to learn it today, is based on the groups. So you can have literally dozens and dozens of different compounds within each of these groups. So here's the major groups on your screen: monoterpene hydrocarbons, sesquiterpene hydrocarbons, monoterpene alcohols, sesquiterpene alcohols, aldehydes, ketones, esters, phenols, and so on, right? So you can see them on your screen. These are the primary groups that all of the compounds fit within. So it's a little bit limited in looking at it this way, only because we're looking at a group rather than looking at each of the individual compounds. So there's a little bit of a variance in what each of those compounds will do, but as a whole, as a group, they're going to have specific characteristics and properties. So let's move on and looking at something we call the structure effect diagram. And what we're going to do is we're going to start taking now each of those groups that we just talked about, and we're going to place each of those groups onto this diagram. I love this diagram for just beginning to understand the chemistry, okay? So what you're seeing here is a horizontal line and a vertical line with all of these shapes then overlaid on top of those two lines. And there's oblong shapes and circle shapes, and each of those shapes is based on the range of the electromagnetic charge. And so don't worry about too much of that. Don't get too freaked out. We're just going to keep this really simple, I promise. So again, the shapes are placed here based on their electromagnetic charge. That's either going to be above or below that horizontal line. Okay, so the electromagnetic charge is going to extend above and below the horizontal line, and then the polarity is going to go left to right of the center vertical line. And so these two characteristics or traits help us to identify the possible action of what the compounds within that group are going to do. So the more negative the charge, the higher up it goes above that horizontal line. And the action of that would be that it's going to be more calming. So the properties that are within that group, the higher it goes above that horizontal line, it's going to have more calming properties. Then below that horizontal line, those compounds that fall below that line are going to be more stimulating. Now, as we look left to right, the compounds that fall over to the left side are going to be what we call the wet side. And those compounds that end up placed over there are going to be more non-polar, which means they're going to have a little bit more harmony with water, a little bit more of an ability to bind with water. Maybe not completely, but as you drop the oils into your glass of water, you see it sort of starting to dissipate and trying to bind with the water. Then on the opposite side of this, the compounds that fall to the right side on this chart are going to be more dry, which means you drop them into the water and it actually moves the water. Like they push the water away and there's no bond with the water whatsoever. So let's quick recap. Everything on the right side is going to be more of a diuretic. As we use it on our body, it's going to be lipophilic and push the water away from the tissues. The essential oil pushes it away, whereas on the left side, it's going to have a little bit more of an affinity with water. Anything placed above the horizontal line is going to be more calming. Everything below the horizontal line is going to be more stimulating and energizing. Now, there's one more thing to note before we start to overlay the compounds now on this chart, is that anything in that bottom left-hand quadrant, like the phenols, for example, are going to be more warming. They're going to have that spicy, warm, sometimes caustic effect on the skin. It'd be more sensitive. Your skin will be more sensitive. It can be more hot. You need to dilute those oils a little bit more. Whereas the oils in the top right-hand quadrant are going to be more of the cooling oils, like the peppermints, the mints, and down in the bottom left, the oreganos and the thymes. So also seeing here that not only are we seeing the polarity and the electromagnetic charge, but we're also seeing the temperature. Okay, so let's move on, and now we'll start to make sense. We've overlaid, we've placed, we can see now where each of these compound families land on this chart. So aldehydes in the top left corner, the esters in the middle to the right, the sesquiterpene hydrocarbons are far to the right, so they're going to be very much into the diuretic and cooling zone. The monoterpene hydrocarbons are still going to be diuretic, and yet they're going to still be a little bit more stimulating. The phenols over on the bottom left-hand corner are going to be stimulating, but they're going to be hot, and they're also not going to have that diuretic effect. All right, so now let's look at kind of just put this into a practical application. Let's say, for example, we have a condition that is hot. You have a condition of a fever or an insect bite or inflammation. Which compounds from which group of compounds do you think would help you the most? All right, so would you want to put more heat onto heat, or would you want to put cooling onto heat? So we would probably want to cool it. So we want to choose compounds that are from this upper right quadrant. So if we have a fever, if we have an insect bite, if we have inflammation, let's maybe focus on choosing oils that are heavily based in this particular region, this zone of our chart. Is that making sense? Now, there's two things you want to keep in mind here. First, one thing you want to keep in mind is that we are not placing individual compounds on this chart. We're putting the families, the groups on the chart. And the second thing you want to keep in mind is that an essential oil has more than one group. So lavender is going to be the Swiss Army knife of essential oils. It's going to have properties, going to have compounds that are in multiple different groups. So if you were to map out lavender, you would have a certain percentage of it all over the map. You're going to have a lot of calming properties. You're going to have a lot of compounds that come from the groups above that horizontal line, but you're also going to have some that come from below that horizontal line. So let's talk about that for a second. Sometimes I hear back from people that, for example, lavender is really calming and really helps people to sleep. Some people use it on their kids and it knocks them out, right? But then you've also heard probably from some people that lavender doesn't work, or that lavender amps my kid up and makes them wild and crazy. Well, guess what? If the child is responding more to those compounds that are below that horizontal line, the lavender can be stimulating for some people because it does have stimulating compounds in it. So remember that an essential oil is a complex mixture of lots and lots of different compounds that can belong to several of these families. So let's look at specific oils really quick. Wild orange, for example, is 93%, approximately 93% monoterpene hydrocarbons. So where's that at on our map? Right here. Okay, bottom right-hand corner. So wild orange is 93% of the compounds in wild orange are going to fit into this circle right here. That's a lot. So that's going to tell us a lot about wild orange. It's going to be a diuretic. All the citrus oils are actually. It's going to be more on the stimulating side, and it's going to push water away. But it also has 3% monoterpene alcohols. Guess what? That's over here. And then it has just under 2% sesquiterpene alcohols. Where's that? That's going to be right here. So about 2%. And then it's going to have a little bit of phenols, less than 1%. A little bit of aldehydes, less than 0.25%, and a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of ketones. What about some other oils? Some are a little bit more balanced, like rosemary is going to have a little bit more diverse, be a little bit more diverse. It's going to have about 50% oxides, about 20% ketones, about 15% monoterpene hydrocarbons over here, and 3% sesquiterpenes, 10% monoterpene alcohols, 1% phenol, and 1% esters. So you can see, again, the key thing is that essential oils are complex mixtures. Some are going to be really heavy in one area of this map, of this diagram, and some might have this really diverse chemistry that's going to do a lot of different things. So now let's look at the properties of each of these groups. We've already established that each of these groups has some similarities in what they're going to do therapeutically. So now you're looking at, I'm overlaying a list of the properties of the therapeutic action of each of these groups. So we can look quickly, and I'm going to give you a chart so you don't have to, you can screenshot this right now if you want to. I'm not going to go through all of these in the interest of time. It would take me just forever to read all of this, but you can take a screenshot, and I'm also going to make available to you a spreadsheet that's going to have all of this at the end. So let's just point out a few quick things. Sesquiterpene hydrocarbons are here in this dark blue circle, oblong shape, and the sesquiterpene hydrocarbons are going to be very anti-inflammatory and very cooling, just based on where they land on this diagram. The monoterpene hydrocarbons are going to be anti-tumoral, antiviral, energy, diuretic, congestion, water retention, cell protective. Didn't we just mention how wild orange is 93% or so monoterpene hydrocarbons? All the citrus oils are. So they're going to have the similar effect of being cell protective, diuretic, energizing, antiviral, and anti-tumoral. What about phenols? Now, if I needed a really huge boost to my immune system, I would be thinking phenols, because the phenol group is the most antibacterial and very antifungal, but most antibacterial group in the entire plant kingdom. So things like thyme has a constituent called thymol, and that is, and thyme is like 60% thymol, which is a type of a phenol. So it's going to be really heavy over here in this area. Oregano also is going to be very heavy over in here. Cinnamon also is going to fit right over here into this orange circle. So we can start to see that based on the chemistry, based on those compounds that are in that oil, those compounds fit into families, and those families have similar therapeutic actions. Is that making sense? I hope. So your next question should be, okay, so then which oils go where? Well, I've got that mapped out for you. So you might want to take a quick screenshot of this as well. Again, this now overlays which essential oils have compounds in that family. Again, remember, complex mixture. You're not going to have one oil land just in one spot on this map. You're going to have oils land in various spots. But let's just point out, lavender is 50% esters. Birch, 99% esters. Wintergreen, 97% esters. Helichrysum, 60% esters. We're looking at, I mentioned earlier, oregano is 80% phenol. Thyme is 60% phenol. What are some other big ones? Cassia is 85% aldehydes. We have patchouli, 65% sesquiterpene alcohols. So again, we can start to see how all of these oils in this one group, like monoterpene hydrocarbons, we talked about all the citrus oils land there, but so does cypress, and so does melaleuca and white fir and phenol. And we can go back to our other map and see what do these things all have in common. So this is the spreadsheet that I'm going to make available to you, and I'm going to give you the link here in just about a minute. So grab a pen. So across the top of this spreadsheet, I have the families. Below that are a few examples, not all, because that would be way too long of a list, and it doesn't really matter. You don't really need to memorize all thousands of compounds, but I've given you some of the major compounds that you are maybe familiar with, or maybe you've heard of, that fit within that family. So for example, one of the major monoterpene hydrocarbons that you've heard of and heard a lot about it is D-limonene. We're going to talk more about that in just a second. D-limonene is a famous compound that is in the family of monoterpene hydrocarbons. Camphor, you've probably heard of camphor. That's another famous constituent compound that's in the monoterpene ketone family. Okay. Then below that, in each of these columns is the properties. So in the monoterpene hydrocarbon column, you'll see that they're antiviral, energizing, diuretic, congestion. We just talked about these. What's the action? So properties is the same as action. What's the action? And then I have that list that I showed you on the last map of what are some of the oils that have that family as a major or minor major or minor compounds in that oil. So for example, frankincense, 90% of frankincense fits into the monoterpene hydrocarbons. All right, so you're going to get this. Don't worry too much about trying to memorize all this right now. This is something for reference for later, something you can study after our call today. Where you can download this, there's 2 pages. The second page has the phenols to the oxides because it doesn't fit all on one page. It'd be impossible to read. But you can download this, take a screenshot, write this down, bit.ly/oil chemistry. This is case sensitive. Make sure your uppercase and lowercase is perfectly written down as you see it on your screen. bit.ly/oil chemistry. The O in oil is capitalized, the C in chemistry is capitalized, and it's all one word. So grab that, go download this handout. All right, now I want to put this into like a real life practical application, something that actually happened to me last week, or happened to my daughter actually. So my daughter's a soccer player. She's an amazing goalkeeper. She is tough as can be, and she sprained her ankle. Now it was like a grade 1 sprain, not a major sprain, thankfully, or she'd have been out for the rest of the season. And fortunately, her dad is a physical therapist, and so he was able to bring home the ultrasound machine, the TENS unit, the not TENS, the electrostem, whatever it's called, all of his modalities that he does. And I was able to get the essential oils, and we combined those together with some ice baths on her foot, and it was amazing. So how would I choose essential oils for a sprained ankle? Based on what I've just taught you about this map and this diagram, how would I choose essential oils based on this diagram? Well, first of all, do we have heat? Yes, that's the very first, very simple question you can ask is there heat? Yes, it's swollen, it's swelling, there's inflammation, you can feel the heat, it's starting to bruise. Immediately we know we need to push fluid out of the tissues because it's swelling and we need to cool it down. So which part of the map, just simply speaking, where we go to? We would go to the right-hand side for diuretics, so everything right of that vertical line, and possibly up above the horizontal line because we want it to be cooling. So I'm going to choose compounds that are in this light blue, dark blue, and pink circles. That's where I'm going to focus. And I want oils that have very high percentages of these compound or chemical families. So what did I do? I knew I wanted a diuretic. I knew I wanted cypress because it's a 55% monoterpene hydrocarbon, and I knew that it was very much a diuretic. But I also wanted some citrus oils in there. And so, because again, citrus oils are going to be strongly diuretic. So which blend does doTERRA have that has cypress and some citrus oils? Aromatouch blend. And it also has basil, which happens to, I didn't write this on the screen, but it happens to also be very anti-inflammatory. So Aromatouch is a perfect blend to hit this monoterpene hydrocarbon category. So right away, I knew I wanted Aromatouch. Secondly, I knew I wanted a lot of sesquiterpene hydrocarbons because they're very anti-inflammatory and super cooling to the area and at least to the inflammation. And so I knew I wanted ginger because ginger's 90% sesquiterpene hydrocarbons. It's 90% copaiba. Copaiba is 90% sesquiterpene hydrocarbons. So I knew I wanted copaiba. And then look at the rest of these oils that are here. Helichrysum, German chamomile, blue tansy, and then from esters, helichrysum again, and then wintergreen. Which blend do we have that has all of those in it? Helichrysum, wintergreen, German chamomile, blue tansy, helichrysum. Sound familiar? Sounds like deep blue, doesn't it? And so deep blue is going to have these effects of antispasmodic, muscle relaxant, anti-inflammatory, cooling. So that's how I selected. So I picked Deep Blue, Aroma Touch, Copaiba, and Ginger. Layered those on the area where she had the sprained ankle. We would put the oils on and let them absorb, rub them in really good for like 2 minutes, and then put her foot in an ice bath and put it in, which is just water that we've added some ice cubes to it. Soak for, 5 minutes or so, and then repeat. And we would repeat that several times along with the ultrasound and modalities that my husband did. So just so you know, she sprained her ankle on Thursday. By Friday, she was walking on it. My husband had taped her, basically created a brace by taping it. And she walked with that fine on Friday. On Saturday, she rested, but she was still walking on it. Sunday, she wore high heels to church. So I don't know about you, but if you've ever had a sprained ankle, you don't wear high heels for months. And she wore high heels on Sunday. On Monday, she played back and she was back in the game playing soccer again on Monday. So from Thursday to Monday is pretty amazing. All right, so we need to move on to talk about adulteration right now, but for your homework, I want to invite you to keep learning about the chemistry because it really does deepen your appreciation for the oils, and it deepens your confidence in choosing and selecting the right essential oils for your symptom. And where I would suggest you go next is go to your Modern Essentials book, go to the back of the Modern Essentials book, back by the appendixes, you'll find a science section, and read the science section. It's going to repeat a little bit of what we talked about today. You'll learn a little bit more. And then go to each of the individual single oils. Go to wild orange, and right below the description of wild orange, it's going to tell you its constituents. It's going to tell you that wild orange is, approximately 93% or 90 up to 94.2% monoterpene hydrocarbons. It's going to tell you what it's comprised of. So right there in your Modern Essentials book, it shows you what the compounds are, and you can start to then learn more about the chemistry of each of your individual oils. All right, so that's your homework if you want to continue to learn more, is go to your science section in the Modern Essentials book and then read each of the individual oil constituents in the main body of your Modern Essentials book. All right, time to move on, and we're going to talk about adulteration. So now I want to talk about, now that you've understand the chemistry a little bit better, we're going to learn some new things right now that a lot of people don't know because a lot of this is kept secret. A lot of this is kept secret from essential oil companies that don't want you to know how they cut corners and how they dilute their oils and cheat so that they can increase profits. And that's really what some essential oils companies do, is they stretch their oils in various different ways to be able to make more profit. Now, I want to talk about 4 types of adulteration today, really briefly, as quickly as I can, just so that you can get an understanding of why it's so important to protect this chemistry. Now that we've talked about chemistry, hopefully you have a better understanding of why it's so important that we don't alter it, that we don't adulterate it, why we protect it. And because it's really the chemistry that is the whole reason why the essential oils work. And we want them to work. We want them to be not only, we want them to be pure, yes, but we also want them to be potent, and we want them to be effective. And so there's 4 key ways. The first way is a very generic, basic, crude way of adulterating an essential oil, and it's really simple, and it's really something that was done a lot more in the past than it happens today. Just because, we're on to you, we know what you're doing here. And so it doesn't sneak past the experts and the analysts as much today. It still does. It still does occur, and it does still sneak past some analysts, and but not as much as it used to. And this is where you take a carrier oil or a perfume or heavier oil of some sort, and you basically just dilute the essential oil with it. And when you do that, you're taking something. Remember, we talked about what volatile is. The heavier compounds are non-volatile. The lightweight compounds are volatile because they go into the atmosphere, right? So you're taking something that's a non-volatile and adding it to your volatiles. And the interesting thing about that is there's a test called the gas chromatograph or the mass spectrometry. There's 2 different. So the GCMS is what they refer to it as. I'm not going to go into all of how that works because we don't have time, but understand that the things that are non-volatile don't come through the GC. They don't come through the GC column. So those heavier molecules don't come through the test. And so someone who isn't experienced in analyzing essential oils could just be looking at the volatiles that come through, and they may not notice that there are non-volatiles that aren't coming through that test. So let me show you what that looks like. Here's an example. It does still happen with some of the heavier oils, like sandalwood is one of the ones that you'll see this with, and because it's expensive, because it's a heavier oil, and because they can kind of get away with it a little bit more, because sandalwood is one of those almost right at the edge of being volatile. It's one of the heavier oils. And so here you see a test result from the GCMS. And you can see this number in the top left-hand corner. If you can see that, it's a really tiny number, and I'll tell you what it is in case you can't see it. It says 21,592,000 and change. This looks exactly the same. You probably didn't even notice that I changed slides because the graph itself looks identical, except for this number in the top left-hand corner, which instead of 21 million is 11 million and change. Okay. So what this number represents, what it represents is how much of the liquid, so the essential oil liquid that they're testing, how much of the liquid is not coming off the GC column. So in the adulterated slide, a lot more of that liquid is not coming through. And so an analyst should immediately know if we expect sandalwood to have about 11 million not coming through the GC column, and this sample has 21 million not coming through the GC column, someone has added probably up to like 50% some kind of another carrier oil, some kind of a non-volatile that's been added to this sample. So it's been adulterated very clearly. Again, this is crude. This is a more old school way of adulterating the oils, and we've gotten a lot more sophisticated than that. So we're going to move on and talk about the next type of adulteration. And this is this is a secondary species. So this happens a lot with cassia and cinnamon. And this is where you take a less expensive oil like cassia that has that's very similar chemically to a more expensive oil like cinnamon, and blend the two together. So cinnamon and cassia are like cousins. They're very similar chemically. And if you were to take the cassia, cassia is a great oil. I use cassia all the time. I have it diffusing up in one of my upstairs bedrooms right now. But it is a less expensive oil, and oftentimes companies will blend it. And this is actually a diagram of a test from on the market right now competitor that sells this as that sells cinnamon. I'm going to show you on the next slide. So there's a couple of dead giveaways that you would not have in cinnamon that you would have in cassia. And this is how you can tell that a cinnamon has been adulterated. The first is that cassia has a constituent called coumarin, and it is not present at all in cinnamon. Okay, so this would never be present in cinnamon. The second dead giveaway is, see this right here, and I'll try to say it correctly, is orthomethoxyaldehyde. And you can see the percentage present in normal cassia is this sample is 10%. So anywhere from like 6 to 12%. In cinnamon, if this were cinnamon, it would be 0, or if it had any at all, it would be like 0.25 or like less than 1%. It would never have 10% or 12%. So these two, if they are present in cinnamon, would be the dead giveaways. So let's look at one. What do you see here? You see coumarin at 1%. That should never be in a cinnamon sample. And you see the orthomethoxyaldehyde at 6.8%. And what did I say? You would never see it above like 0.5%. So this is clear, like absolutely, unquestionably adulterated, where they've taken the cinnamon, they've taken the cassia, they've blended them together, probably at a ratio of about 50-50 in order to drive the cost way down. But this company is passing this off as pure cinnamon bark. All right, along the same lines as this idea of adding a secondary species, something else that they often do is they'll isolate one of the compounds from a secondary species and then use that. So instead of blending the whole oil like we talked about with cinnamon and cassia, they blend an isolate, right? So an isolate is just an isolated compound. Does that make sense? So they're using part of that secondary species to dilute a more expensive species. And a really good example of this is frankincense. Frankincense is a really important oil to all of us. It's a very precious oil. It's a rather expensive oil. And it also has about a good amount of a compound naturally in it called alpha-pinene. A-pinene, you'll see it with the letter A hyphen pinene. And so frankincense does automatically, normally in nature, have a good amount of this compound in it. But what's really tempting is for other essential oil companies to say, we can buy alpha-pinene super cheap, like $10 per kilo, and we can dilute it into the frankincense in order to stretch the frankincense oil. This here that you're looking at is actually a commercial sample that's from a real source that's actually on the market, and it shows 80% alpha-pinene. That's too much. A normal sample of frankincense would have like 40 to 50% alpha-pinene. So we know clear as day that this frankincense sample, they've taken a cheap isolated compound that they've sourced at $10 a kilo, and they've dumped it into our frankincense oil to dilute and to stretch it. Again, this is not from doTERRA. This is what doTERRA's sample looks like. By the way, just so you know, when you're reading these, this line along the bottom of the GC is the time. And so that's another thing that when people are analyzing oils that they kind of do wrong is there should be a really long run time. So this was ran for 90 minutes. This one was ran for 80 minutes. This one was ran for 55 minutes. And I've seen them, here's one for 110 minutes. This is how long they're running their test. And if you run it for shorter time periods, these spikes, you can't see the spikes because they're too close together. And so you miss things. You miss constituents that you can't read because the spikes are right on top of each other. Each of those spikes represents a compound that's coming through the GC column at that specific time. Okay, I have 2 more adulterations to share with you and what gets done, and then we're going to wrap up. Okay, so you guys still with me? I know this is a little heavy today, and I know there's a lot of information, but hopefully, I love this stuff, so hopefully you do too. So the third type of adulteration is where we've diluted with a synthetic. So in the previous 2 examples, they actually went and found a natural source of either an isolate or another plant material and diluted it with that. Now we're talking about a synthetic addition. We're actually adulterating with a petrochemical derived component, and we're adding that to the essential oil. And the problem here is that our bodies don't recognize synthetic compounds. We're not able to accept them into our body. They don't react properly with our body's receptor sites, and so they're not going to be therapeutic. These chemical compounds that are being added that are made in a lab are not going to be therapeutic, and they might even be toxic. So I want to talk about something that took me a while to understand, and so I'm really hoping I can explain this in a way that makes total sense, because it's really interesting stuff, and it's how we catch those who are adulterating oils with synthetics, because actually the synthetics have gotten so good that they can actually go through a GC test and show up as natural. So they can actually be tested, and if the analyst doesn't know what they're doing, these synthetics can actually come through the GC and look totally normal and natural. So there is something called chirality, and this is how we can tell whether or not that synthetic is actually really made in a lab or made in nature. So chirality in Greek means left hand or right hand. So it means handedness. And nearly every essential oil molecule, so like we talked about limonene earlier, nearly every essential oil molecule like limonene has 2 forms. And I think the easiest way for me explain this, maybe because I don't know, some kind of Marvel geek or something, but think about a doppelganger. What's a doppelganger when you watch Flash, the movie Flash? It's someone that looks just like you in another world, but they're not you. And so it's the same thing with these molecules. Limonene has two forms. It has D-limonene and L. So it's usually D and L are the two forms. So limonene can come in two different forms. These two forms are mirror images of each other. So it's like your hands. If you put your left hand on top of your right hand, it's not with your palms facing, but where one hand is on top of the other, you can never get your thumbs and fingers to line up, right? No matter how you turn your hands, they're never going to line up and match and be the same. And this is why you can't wear a left-handed glove on your right hand. They look the same, but they're not the same. They're a mirror image of each other. And the same thing is true with these molecules. Almost every essential oil molecule has two forms, the L and the D form, that are mirror images from each other. The scientific name is not doppelganger, it's enantiomer, E-N-A-N-T-I-O-M-E-R, enantiomer. And so what that means is that there's a pair of molecules that look alike, but they're not alike, and they're not going to fit into receptor sites in the same exact way. So what does this have to do with a catching and adulteration? The thing that in nature, here's the cool thing, is that a plant in nature is going to favor either the L form or the D form one more than the other. So in lemon produces limonene, and it produces one form at a 97%, the other form at 3%. So we would know by looking at a sample of lemon, the limonene, the D and the L should be 3% and 97%. If we were looking at a synthetic, however, limonene, it would be 50-50. And the reason why, here's the key thing, is that laboratory produced synthetic compounds cannot control chirality, cannot control handedness the way that nature does. And so laboratory produced synthetic compounds produce more of a ratio of 50-50, as you see here. So same thing is true with limonene, which is in lavender. Lavender likes to make the L-limonene more than the D-limonene, and it's like a 95-5% ratio. So we would know if we were looking at limonene at 50-50 that it was created synthetically in a lab. Here's an example. This is coriander. There's a lot of adulterated coriander on the market, adulterated with synthetics. And in this sample, like I said, the GC looks normal. So if you look at just the GC, which, a lot of companies are like, here's our GC analysis. Great. It looks normal. Synthetics can actually get through and look totally normal on the GC if you're not doing the chiral testing. If you're not doing a chiral GCMS analysis, it's going to tell a very different story. The D to L ratio in this sample is 70-30. Okay, 70-30, and it should be more like 84-16. So we know unequivocally that they have jacked up this sample with a synthetic linalool. They've added it to the coriander. That's what's caused that to jack up that ratio. We know that there's been a significant cut or adulteration with something foreign, something synthetic, to get the cost down of this oil. Okay, I'm going to quickly move on to the type 4 adulteration because we're running out of time. This is the most complicated one, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on it because it kind of makes my head spin. And so, but here's the basic gist of it, is that an adulterated, so what they're doing is they're taking a synthetic, they're adding a synthetic component, but that synthetic component that they're adding is actually started from a natural source. Okay, that sounds super complicated. But here's the thing. This is the way everything is headed. This is the way everything is going. This is what's becoming most common right now. And it's what's going to require the most expertise to be able to detect it. It's going to require the best testing procedures, the best analysts, the best equipment. It's going to require cutting edge science. And it's not going to be just your run of the mill, GC test. we don't really need to understand the entire process of what's going on, but the basic idea is that you're adding a synthetic, but that synthetic component was made from a precursor that came from a natural plant material. Here's an adulterated sample of spearmint. Again, this comes from a competitor. The main compound in spearmint is called L-carvone. About 58% of spearmint oil is L-carvone. So this oil on the GC test looks totally natural. It doesn't look like it's a synthetic carvone. And nearly any lab that tested this would look at this and it would look totally natural. But we know that without any doubt that it's actually been adulterated. And the reason why we know that is because of this tiny, tiny little peak right here, that little peak. And that peak is showing a nitrogen containing molecule. That is a synthetic marker, that tiny, you can't even barely see it on your screen. You probably can't even see it on your screen, but just know that there's this little peak right here around the 30 mark, that the 30-minute mark, that has a nitrogen. So what happens, looks like I don't have a picture of it, but so basically they started with a, they started with a natural D-limonene that came from citrus, and they went and put it through all of these different chemical processes that ultimately changed it from D-limonene into L-carvone. And then they used that as a filler in that particular spearmint. But because it started as a natural source, it's going to come through all of the tests that are out there looking completely natural, even on specialty tests like isotope tests. So it really requires somebody who's very skilled, who's doing the testing to catch that. This is a sample that came from China. That little peak right there, again, is the synthetic marker. So I'm going to wrap it up and just kind of say that this right here, you guys, is the reason why I only use and I only trust doTERRA, because this really is an ever-changing game of technology. And I know that doTERRA partners with the right scientists, the right chemists, that they're cutting edge with all of their equipment, that they stay above all of these things that are happening in the world of adulteration. When I hear people come to me and they say, you know what about this new oil company? Or, hey, did you know that so-and-so started their own oil company? Dr. So-and-so started his own company. Or did you know that, my cleaning company now sells essential oils? And did you know that my supplement company is now selling essential oils? I can just get them there. You know what? I don't even blink, you guys, when I hear that, because do you really think that a company that makes laundry soap is going to have the resources, the cutting edge equipment, the best scientists to be able to source and test essential oils if essential oils are not their number one priority? My opinion is absolutely not. You have to be completely 100% essential oil committed to be able to source and test and spend a lot more money on testing than any other company out there is willing to do to ensure that one of these adulterations is not being used. It's an ever-changing market, and we have to have the top experts working for us to be able to catch these changes. So just know that the essential oils that you use, every barrel goes through many tests to both ensure the purity of it, that it's pure, but also to ensure its potency, that it's going to be effective. And what I love is that doTERRA's testing is all performed by third parties, the best scientists, the best experts, with the very best equipment that's available in this cutting edge industry. Every batch goes through GC and MS and chiral testing and microbial testing and organoleptic testing, so that you know and can be confident that your oils are free of synthetics, free of harmful or foreign constituents, free of synthetics, free of any adulterations of all kind, free of heavy metals, pesticides, and any other non-volatile compounds that shouldn't be in there. Last thing I want to let you guys know is that there's a website called Source2U, source2u.com. This is a great place to continue learning more about the growers, the distillers, the scientists, the testing, the practitioners that test our oils. You can even go on here and track your bottle of oil and see your test results from your batch of oils. There's a lot number on the bottom of your bottle. You can go in here, put your lot number in, and you can actually see the GCMS testing on your bottle bottle of oil, which I love. I love that there's total transparency and that doTERRA has nothing to hide. If you want to continue learning more, I have 2 sources for you. Take a screenshot. I love this book. It's called The Chemistry of Essential Oils Made Simple. If you really love the chemistry, it's a probably 3-inch thick book. The made simple part, I think, is a little bit of a joke. But if you want to learn more about chemistry, get this book. It's awesome. If you want something free that you can download, this is a great source right here. Again, case sensitive, write down bit.ly/chemistry handbook. The C is capitalized, the H is capitalized. So download that. That's a free doTERRA Essential Oil Chemistry Handbook, or order that book maybe on Amazon. All right, you guys, I'm going to wrap up for today. We've gone overtime, so I'm going to skip through this section. Just know if you guys aren't ordering your refills through Loyalty Rewards, you guys are missing out on up to 30% in free product. You're not getting the best price on your oils. So definitely make sure you're taking advantage of all of these amazing deals so you can shop smart. And if you're interested in learning more about how you can share the oils, I'm sure you're by now having people asking you, how you're doing so well with your headaches or whatever you used to experience and how you're looking and feeling so much better. If you're interested in earning referrals for your friends who are asking and wanting more information about how they can get the oils as well, know that doTERRA does like to reward you greatly for those who are sharing the gift of health with others. Reach out to me if you guys want to learn more about that. So that completes it. We've completed all 8 classes. We have some bonus classes coming up for you, and then we are going to repeat these classes again. I hope that you've learned a lot and that you've enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing you on our next bonus call. And so stay in touch with me, and we'll get you connected to our next webinar. You guys, thank you so much. It was great being with you. Have an amazing week. Bye-bye.